Hello, and welcome back to Nadine's Kitchen. I'm Kailey Proctor, your Oncology Dietitian. Today, I'm so excited to be back with Chef Jonathan for our Taste of Fall Flavor episode. Fall is often a time when family and friends get together for warm, home-cooked meals. However, this can be a difficult time for patients undergoing treatment, as they often might be too tired to attend events or be afraid that foods don't taste quite as they should. So today, we're going to go over some tasty, flavorful meals that are fatigue-friendly. Let's get started. Objectives for this episode include 1. Identify ways to add flavor to meals when taste changes after treatment. 2. Properly cut common fruits and vegetables. And 3. Discuss strategies to prepare seasonal, high-protein, high-calorie meals when you may be too tired to cook.
Welcome to the Taste of Fall. Today's cooking episode is going to include butternut squash soup, white beans, Swiss chard, and braised short ribs. So let's go ahead and get started. I think we're going to first start off with our butternut squash. What I like to do is trim off the ends, and I'm going to use only about half of this for this recipe, and set this other piece aside. And I find you can use a peeler, or if you have a nice sharp knife, that you can peel it with your knife as well. So we're going to get this peeled up. And dice. Now, one of the tricks with dicing is to keep everything square so it doesn't roll around, less likely to cut yourself. So we're going to get a couple pieces and again lay it flat and come back and just dice this like so. And I've got my sauce pot over here simmering, or on warm right now, so that as I continue to prep this, that it's ready to go. What I'm going to do is get a little olive oil. My pot here is nice and warm. I'm going to put a couple tablespoons of olive oil in there. And we can start with getting this butternut squash sauteing. And we'll add in some onion, garlic, some fresh thyme, bay leaf, and a vegetable stock. So I'll set this aside. I'm going to do our onion first and show you a little trick about how I cut onions. So I'm going to take that root end off, just barely. I'm going to flip it around and take the other end. Set this aside. Cut it in half. That root end, still attached, will kind of keep it from flying around so that you can slice, dice, mince a lot easier. So I can stand it up on its edge, or I can lay it down and do my slices this way. This way seems to be better. I'm not going to go all the way down, but just about 3/4 the way, and then you can see how it stays together. Take it that way, and then come back, and you can see just nice dice. And that's all there is to it. So add that onion in there. I think I'm also going to add a little bit of celery and carrot. Again, we're just going to dice that up. And then, yes?
Well, I was just going to add that by using fresh herbs and produce like onions and garlic, that adds a lot of flavor to your meals, especially when they're being cooked. So that's going to add more flavor when your taste buds might not be the same or foods taste dull.
Good point. So, garlic, give it a little smash, and then take a couple cloves. And what I do is just hit it with my knife a little bit, and then it peels very easily, comes right out of the shell. Okay, so that's a little garlic trick. And I'm just going to give this a little rough chop, because this soup's going to be pureed at the end of it anyway. So we'll do some garlic in there. Would you hand me that vegetable stock? Yes? Mm-hmm. All right. Got it?
Yep. And again, using things like beef broth, chicken broth, vegetable stock, that's going to add even more flavor than using just water, because it's simmered with other spices as well.
Exactly. So I'm going to add my stock in there just enough to kind of cover up those veggies. And we'll let that simmer probably for about 30 minutes. Before I close that up, I want to put a bay leaf or two and maybe some fresh thyme and kind of stir that in. Also, I think I'm going to flavor this soup with a little bit of nutmeg, just kind of add that fall spice to it. Okay, so we can adjust the seasoning a little bit later, but I will put a little salt and pepper in for now.
I know salt gets a really bad rap in the nutrition community, but when you don't have a lot of taste, salt also adds flavor. It's a cooking property to it. So even if you're eating an apple later on, you can always add a little bit of salt, and that's going to bring out some of the flavor.
Very well said. All right, so now that our soup has simmered for about 30 minutes, we're going to go ahead and take out the butternut squash, the carrots, the celery, any thyme stems that come out. You may want to just pull those aside. And I'm not getting much of the liquid just yet because I want to add in, as I blend it, I want to add it in to get to the right consistency. So I'll add in a little bit at a time once I get that puree ready to go.
How would you feel about patients adding in whole milk or heavy cream if they needed more calories?
I would definitely add in some heavy cream.
Okay.
And also, one of the things I'll show you later, but I love to top this with a little avocado too.
Ooh.
So I'm going to take this over to the blender. Let's cover this up. And make sure anytime that you're blending hot liquids that there's a vent. You don't want to seal it because it will combust a little bit on you. So a little pulse. Now back to the stove, and I'm going to pour the remainder of this out into another bowl and put my soup. So we'll pour this out into the nice warm simmering pot. And you can see the consistency looks pretty good as is.
Oh, yeah.
It's got a nice coat to it. So now we just want to give it a taste. See, it coats the back of a spoon, so that's about right. I think it's pretty good. We're going to add in maybe just a little bit more of the nutmeg. And a little salt.
Because salt adds flavor.
And let that simmer up a little bit. While that's heating,
One thing patients can also do to add more calories if you've been losing weight on treatment is to add a spoonful of butter, or you can add more olive oil to your portion to give you about 100 extra calories.
cool. So I've got a couple different bowls here. Why don't should we add avocado to this one?
Yes, we should.
Maybe a little,
More heart-healthy fats and more calories.
there you go. So let's get that. Scrape this out a little bit. That's my other bowl. quite as ripe as I'd like, but I think it'll be just fine.
Do you
We'll
just
top
put,
a couple.
okay, you chop it and then you put it on top?
Yeah.
Okay.
This could also, you can put some crab on this. This is really good.
Ooh, crab would add more protein.
So set it up like this. We'll do a couple larger bowls and a couple of those smaller bowls too. So I just fill it up. We'll do a couple small cups as well.
Looks beautiful.
Okay. And then, like I said, we can add a little avocado to that. We can add a little crab, a little bit of the heavy cream.
Okay.
If you want to do a cream soup, but this is vegan, all vegetable based, so not too bad. Would you like to give it a taste?
Yes. It's my favorite part. It's so good, especially with the avocado.
Awesome. Well, that's your butternut squash soup all wrapped up. So now we're going to go ahead and get started on our short ribs. First thing I want to do is get my pan nice and hot. I've got some short ribs here that are portioned, and really a nice generous seasoning of salt and pepper. And that's really all you want to season with at this point. You could also put in a little bit of chili powder or things like that, but I like to keep it fairly simple, just some salt and pepper on both sides. And again, very liberally, because this meat's going to simmer for about 2.5 hours, and that seasoning really needs to get infused into that meat. So a little bit of olive oil in our pan. And I'm going to sear everything in this pan here, and then I'm going to transfer them into our Dutch oven. And then we'll just throw that in the oven for about, again, 2.5 hours or so. So pan's nice and hot.
So how does the Dutch oven work?
It's basically a slow cooker, but it doesn't plug in. So
Okay.
you heat it up. You can heat it up on the stove, or you can just go directly into the oven with it. But I like to warm it up on the stove, put my ingredients into that, and then put the whole thing into the oven. And then you can manage it like you would a crock pot.
So if you had a slow cooker recipe, you could make that in the Dutch oven?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So I'm going to let those sear. Searing our short ribs, I'm going to flip them over. You want to get them nice and caramelized on either side. And if you were doing this in a slow cooker, you'd probably want to do it in the same way in a separate pan and then add it into the slow cooker, because the slow cooker is not really going to sear or brown anything.
Even if you put oil at the bottom?
No.
Okay.
No, they don't get that
Good
hot.
to know.
I'm going to add in a little bit of diced onion into this.
Again, adding onions, garlics, the salt, the pepper, that really adds a lot more flavor if you're struggling to taste food.
And smash a little garlic. And again, some fresh herbs like thyme. I also have some marjoram here. We'll set that in. And then once these are seared up, I also probably want to put in a little bit of what we call, it's called mirepoix. Mirepoix is a mixture of carrots, onions, and celery. And that is really a basic ingredient in most stews and soups. You're always going to have that mirepoix, onions, carrots, and celery. Okay?
Okay.
I'm going to put this, and slide this over. Get my Dutch oven as we have it here. And I'm going to transfer this in there. And then I just want to, if you get me that beef stock over there.
Yes.
And I just want to cover this with a little bit of that beef stock. Now this is braising, so braising is going to take a few hours again, and it's going to take a more tough cut of meat like the short rib or brisket, and it will slowly cook with moisture, which is braising, and that will eventually tenderize the meat itself. So a little wine, please.
Sure.
I meant for me. No. Here we go. Add in a little bit of wine in there. And then we're going to cover this, put it into our oven. I've got the oven at about 400 degrees. And we're going to slide this into the oven. And again, for about 2.5 hours, we'll go ahead and check it. And that's how we start off the short ribs. So we're going to pick this up where we left off, and we're going to start with the beans, the cannellini beans. We'll start the beans off in our saute pan. I want to add in some of our mirepoix, that's celery, carrots, and onions.
Again, adding more flavor. We love it.
A little bit of garlic. You know, I'm a big fan of the fresh herbs, obviously. Throw some thyme in there. And then I've got some of these dried cannellini beans. We'll set those in there.
So you can put them in dried. You don't have to cook them before?
We're going to cook them right now, but we're just going to cook them with some flavor.
All
So
right.
if you just boil them in water, they don't really pick up a lot of flavor. So we want to get them going in there, and then cover that with some vegetable stock. And we'll simmer this and add more stock as needed.
Okay.
But you don't really want to get it dry. So, and they don't necessarily need to be covered.
Okay.
So you just let that simmer for a little bit. I will put in a little bit of salt and pepper to begin, because that's also going to get into that bean itself as well.
And add more flavor.
Exactly. So we'll let those simmer until tender, probably about 30 to 45 minutes,
Okay.
and we'll go from there.
Perfect.
All right, so now that our beans have simmered for 45 minutes, you can see, we'll put it here on the cutting board, but you can see they're pretty tender. You can kind of smush them with the back of a spoon. I don't like them to be super overcooked or well done. I like a little bit of kind of a al dente to it.
Okay.
And a little bit of crunch. So we've let that simmer. I'm going to add in our Swiss chard. And in this recipe, I've got a little bit more onion that we're going to put in, some fresh oregano, and we're also going to add in a little bit of anchovy, which is, I think, your favorite.
Anchovies, for some patients, can be a little bit difficult to tolerate, but when they're put in a different dish, they often add a lot of calcium, so that's really good to preserve bone health, and the omega-3 fatty acids, which are good for your hair, your nails, your heart, and your skin.
And some people don't always look to anchovies for those things, but
No, they're
when
very unassuming.
When they're in a dish like this, it's a very Tuscan white bean dish. It adds a good salinity or salt to it.
So more flavor.
And more flavor, exactly.
One thing to keep in mind, some patients do get very sensitive to smells of food. It may trigger some nausea, and a lot of these meals are warm, so the smells might get through the house. If that's the case, maybe take yourself out of the kitchen. If you can, go outside, or even put a little bit of peppermint oil under your nose just so you're not getting any of the flavors that might cause you to feel sick.
Well, I think this fresh thyme, garlic, and onion smells delicious.
Oh, it smells amazing.
So we're going to add a little bit more of that seasoning into it, some salt and pepper. And once this kind of comes up hot enough where it's boiling, I'm going to add in my Swiss chard.
So this recipe, it's super high in fiber, and one benefit of fiber is actually for breast cancer patients, it may reduce the estrogen floating in the body because the fiber helps absorb it in the digestive tract. So the more green leafy vegetables, beans, and whole grains are also good sources of fiber.
Very good. This will cook down like spinach, so we'll just give it a little stir, and we'll cook very quickly once it gets into that liquid. Give it a little flip. And as that cooks down just a little bit more, I think we're ready for our short ribs.
Sounds good.
All right. Let's, if you would, grab a couple plates from behind us.
Yes.
Yeah, just set them there. Okay. So we're going to plate this with our Swiss chard, kind of on the bottom of the plate with our beans. And again, let that wilt down a little bit. And what I like to do is just grab it like this. Make sure we get some of that chard in there.
Perfect.
And I definitely want to get more of those beans. Okay. So now that we have that, we can go ahead and grab our short ribs out of the braising liquid. And they feel nice and tender. They've been in that oven for about 2.5 hours. We're just going to set that here.
Oh, it looks beautiful.
So tender, it's falling apart.
And again, as you guys saw, it was very simple just to put everything in the Dutch oven, put it in the oven, and it just sits, it cooks. The flavors really marinate in. So if you're too tired to cook a meal, all you have to do is put your ingredients in the Dutch oven or a slow cooker, let it sit, the flavors will soak in. You have a very easy meal that's prepared for you, that's healthy, and it has a lot of flavor to it.
Exactly. Would you grab me a ladle, please?
Of course.
And we're just going to take some of this braising liquid with that wine and onions and garlic, beef broth, and we'll just put a little bit over the top, like that. And then I always like a little, maybe a little sprig of something, kind of set it off, make it look pretty. Okay, so there's your full short rib with your white beans and Swiss chard. So those should be pretty fork tender.
Okay.
And easy to cut through, easy to chew. Why don't you go ahead and have a taste?
I'd love to. Smells so good.
Good?
It's excellent.
Excellent. Well, that wraps up our fall cooking series for today with your butternut squash soup, braised short ribs, Swiss chard, and white beans.
For more information about the services offered at Leonard Cancer Institute with Mission Hospital, please go to our website at leonardcancerinstitute.com. If you're interested about more information regarding oncology nutrition, feel free to check out the American Cancer Society, the American Institute for Cancer Research, cancer.gov, or contact me, Kailey Proctor, your oncology dietitian. See you next episode.
Bye.